Hi guys, so today I wanted to talk about something that I think is really important, and it's something that I have questioned or thought about in my own life. So I actually did a ton of research and I thought I would share with you everything I learned and kind of, my experience with this. And that has to do with pumping and your supply and women who are worried because you think you're not pumping enough. Especially if you're a full-time nursing mom and you're just trying to pump to build up, a freezer stash or things like that, and you're worried because you're not pumping as much as you know your baby should be drinking. And I'm going to make a point to, I'm not going to get into like supply worries or issues right now. I'm going to do that in a different video. So I'm going to try to keep the focus purely on this video. The whole point, the whole topic is about pumping. Supply and pumping. So I'm going to try to focus on that and not get into some of the other stuff. But I am going to do a different video on that, so you can look for that in the near future. All that being in mind, here are some points to keep in mind if you are a nursing mom and you're pumping and you feel like you're not pumping enough and you're wondering what's happening. So a quick backstory with me is that I was pumping, trying to build up my freezer stash, and I was just noticing that I'm not pumping that much. I would pump, just a couple of ounces per boob, if that. And I was like, there's no way. My baby's clearly, she's not hungry. She's growing. She's got little fabulous chunky rolls. I was like, my supply should be fine, but I'm definitely not pumping as much as like the average baby would drink. And then I was like, wasn't too worried because this is my third time to the ballpark, so to speak. So I've learned to trust in my supply, but I still was kind of like, what is going on? Like, it's so annoying not being able to pump. So that is what led me to doing all my research. So here's some helpful points. That's the backstory for me personally. And here's some points to keep in mind. And I have notes, so I'm going to be looking down sometimes, okay? So basically, pumping, the whole point of pumping is that you're making extra. You're making things in addition to your supply. Now, obviously the exception would be mothers who are pumping only and not. But I'm going to talk mainly about nursing mothers who are pumping extra. So keep that in mind. The pumping is extra. That's one thing to keep in mind. It's on top of your normal supply that you're feeding your baby. The other thing to keep in mind is that your body, your supply, it regulates itself. When you first have that baby, you have your colostrum, and then your milk comes in, and your body makes way too much milk. That's why you get the whole hard boob thing going on. You get the crazy letdown where your shirt's soaked, you're spraying the baby. You get all that craziness goes on. But your body is smart, or it should be smart. Your body knows what it's doing, and it regulates that, and the supply will drop down to what the baby needs. It shouldn't stay, your boobs will start to get softer. They won't stay hard like they used to. And again, those are some supply woes, so I'm not going to get into all that. But just know that your supply is going to regulate. You're not going to always be overproducing. Your boobs, this is something really, really important that I was told, and I think it's so important to know. Your boobs aren't made to store milk. They were made to provide a meal for that baby. They're not made to keep tons of extra ounces of milk at all times for you to just pump when you want. That's not what they're designed. They're actually smarter than that. They're designed to regulate the amount of milk that your baby needs. So keep that in mind. And your supply regulating, that can take a month, it can take a couple of months. Some people it can take even slightly longer. I feel bad for them because waiting for your boobs to regulate means extra leaking and all of that, but it can. So another thing to keep in mind is that pumps do not have the same effect on your boob or even your mind as a real baby does. They just do not. A pump is not as effective as a baby. Even a hospital grade pump is not as effective as a baby. They have proven this again and again and again. That's important. Keep that in mind. The pump is not going to be as good at getting that milk out as your baby is. And then here is the kicker. Here's what's so important. Here's what's going to make a lot of you feel better right now. It is perfectly normal for a mother who's nursing their baby to only be able to pump ½ an ounce to 2 ounces per boob per pumping session, even if their baby is actually eating about 8 ounces of milk in one boob alone. It's perfectly normal that you might only be able to pump out that amount of milk. That's what was happening with me too. That's so normal. And it has to do with all those points I was just making about how your boobs regulate. The pump's not going to be as effective as the baby. You might not have a ton extra after feeding your baby like normal. And even if you missed a feeding and you still were like, well, I missed a feeding though, so I should be able to pump more. You still might not be able to because of the other reasons about your breast is not responding to the pump as well. And that's the other thing. Some women do respond better to pumping than others. Some women, their boobs will just take to a pump better, basically. They'll be able to pump more than the average woman, but just know that that's actually rarer than not. So that's something to keep in mind. Not all women respond well to pumping. Some women respond better to pumping than others. I don't respond great to pumping. I'm not a great pumper, even when I try to be better about it. I'm not. My boobs much prefer the baby. That's where they're much more effective. So with some of those points that I just made in mind, here are some reasons that you may be pumping less than you'd expect to or less than you used to. 1, your supply is regulated, like we talked about. 2, your pump can't keep up with you like a baby can, like we talked about. Now here's a different issue. Your pump might be bad. You need to make sure your pump, that the motor's working and that all your pump parts are clean and free of water, and that all your parts fit you right. That, for example, your breast shield, this is a very common mistake, is that women, little parts that actually hook to the breast need to fit you correctly, and they make different sizes. A lot of times people just use the one that comes standard with the pump, and that's just the average size. Most women are actually slightly bigger than that. So you need to make sure you're using the right shield that fits your boob. And if you're like, I have no idea how to measure that, you need to contact a lactation consultant. Most of them are free. You don't have to pay these women most of the time to get help with this. And so that's something you should do. They can fit you. And I know it seems kind of weird, but if you think about it, it's good to know. Or you can just try on your own. Stress can actually cause you to pump less. The more relaxed you are, the better you'll pump, and that works with real babies too. But it's especially important with the pump, because the pump is already not as good as the baby. So you need to be real relaxed, let that milk come down, you know. Also your hormones, periods. When you have your period, you might have a slight dip in your supply. If you're pregnant, you could have a dip in your supply. So that could be affecting why you're seeing less at the pump. You also might need more fluid. You might just need to drink more water. Also, it's a common misconception that there's a certain amount of water that you're supposed to drink. Now they tell you should drink to thirst. When you're thirsty, you should drink. So just try to drink a lot of water. You know, you don't need to overdrink. You don't need to shoot for some magic number. Drink when you're thirsty. Drink to thirst. It's very important. And when you're nursing, you tend to be thirsty more than when you're not nursing. So just follow that thirst. Trust your body. Drink lots of water, and that should help. Also, if you've been sick or had an illness, your supply might dip a little. And none of those mean that you need to supplement or do anything crazy. It's just reasons why you might be seeing less at the pump. Then there are some things you can do to be a better pumper. One of them is just experimenting. Try different settings on your pump. Maybe you need it, you know, you don't always have to have it turned up all the way. Sometimes you don't respond better to it being on high. Your boobs might actually respond better to it being at a lower pace. That might feel more natural for them. So experiment, play around with it, see what's better. Make sure you have a proper shield, like I said, proper fitting shield, and you can ask for help for that, or you can just try it yourself. You can look up on there's tips. I'm not going to get into it right here. But if you Google it, or you go to breastfeeding websites, or even websites like Medela, the people who make pumps, they usually will have they'll be able to give you guidelines on what shield will fit you. Make sure that your pump is working and that it's clean. And this is a little information a lot of people don't know. If you're worried that your pump, the vacuum part of it, that the motor or something's not working as good as it should, it's not pump sucking as well as it should, call around. Not every lactation consultant, but a lot of lactation consultants will actually have in their position a little, I don't know exactly what you call them, but they have these little meters that can measure the vacuum suction, and they know what the pumps are supposed to, how much they're supposed to do. So they can actually test that. So just call around and you can find somebody who can test your pump for you. You might want to try adding in more pumping sessions. Just pump more often. I know it's not fun, but that's something you could try if pumping's important to you. Oh, and the other thing is to make sure that you're pumping long enough. They really recommend that you pump for at least 15 minutes. Double pumping tends, in most studies, double pumping shows that it works better. That means pumping both boobs at the same time tends to yield a higher amount. Also, when you have that last drop, you should continue to pump for another 2 to 5 minutes just to make sure. So there you go. So there's some information specifically related to supply worries about pumping. If you are a nursing mother and you're pumping and you're trying to build up your freezer stash, or for whatever reason, remember, most important thing, it is perfectly normal that you may only pump ½ ounce to 2 ounces of milk per boob. It is normal that it might take you 2 to 3 pumping sessions to get only enough for one feeding. That's normal. So if you look around and you see these photos of these mamas and they are like, ooh, I just pumped 23 ounces in one sitting, know that they're actually not normal. And that doesn't mean they're bad, they're lucky. But, you know, that's not normal. That's not common. What you're experiencing is way more common because that's actually how your body's supposed to work. Like I said, just keep that in mind. Body not made to store milk. Your body's made to deliver the milk to the baby and then keep it coming. It's, you know, the boobs aren't made as a little storage unit. So it is perfectly normal for you to not be able to get as much out, and don't worry so much about it. And another tip is, like, when you have your baby, when you first have your little newborn home, that's when you're going to have the most milk. That's a really good time to build up your freezer stash right then. Always feed the baby first. Make sure the baby's nice and full. Pump after a feeding. Then you can store that milk, and that's a good time to do it because as your supply regulates, you're going to have less milk. If you're pumping right from the start, you're going to have two things going on. One, you're catching out all that extra milk that your baby cannot possibly drink because your boobs have made enough to stock a buffet. And then two, it'll also tell your boobs to keep making a little bit extra milk, and that'll work for a while. But even if you're doing that, just know that your body's still going to start to regulate to the baby. That baby, they're the ones who can get the milk out the best. If you're really concerned or you really need to pump, you can rent hospital grade pumps, which will do a better job than even the best available pump on the market. So you can look into that if it's something that's concerned to you. As always, find a breastfeeding or lactation consultant around you. They're everywhere, you guys. And like I said, a lot of them will actually work with you for free for a really low price, or your insurance will cover them. And never ever be afraid to ask other people, okay? Alright guys, so I'm going to do a separate video about supply issues and low supply and breastfeeding. So if you have any questions or concerns about that, you can ask them here and I'll make sure to try to address them in that video that'll be up in a couple of weeks, okay? So I hope that helped you out, or at least made some of you feel better. I know I felt a lot better when I figured all of that out. It was something that I was a little worried about, and I wish I could pump better, but at least I know to be confident that the pump is not an accurate representation of what I'm actually making. So keep all of that in mind. All right, you guys, I'll talk to everybody later. Bye.